Long ago, before walls were built and names were written down, the earth shook itself apart. Seas rushed into the wounds. Mountains sank. Valleys flooded. And from the foam of that first breaking wave, the one that covered the world's first scream, a god rose whose temper was the tide itself, whose grief was the undertow, whose love was the riptide that pulls you out before you even know you are gone. His name was Poseidon. In the time before memory, when the old gods had been thrown down and the new ones were still learning the weight of their own power, three brothers drew lots for the world. Zeus, quick and bright, reached first and took the sky, all its thunderheads and constellations, its eagles and its silence. Hades, patient and dark, waited and took what remained beneath the soil, the dead, the roots, the slow rivers that run in absolute dark. And Poseidon struck the earth with his trident, a sound like a mountain falling into an ocean, and claimed all that was wet and wild, every bay and abyss, every current that coiled in the dark like a sleeping serpent, every wave that threw itself against stone until the stone gave up and became sand. He built his palace beneath the Aegean, where light never reaches. Corals grew like forests. Whales moved like silent mountains. Eels wrapped themselves around his columns. And Poseidon sat on a throne of driftwood and bone, the bones of ships that had insulted him, the bones of sailors who had forgotten his name, his hair streaming upward as if he were always falling backward through water, his beard tangled with kelp, his eyes the color of a storm 2 days out at sea. He was not a kind god. The stories never pretend otherwise. He was the reason sailors prayed before setting out, pressing coins into their own palms, murmuring his name like a curse they hoped to make friendly. He was the reason mothers stood on cliffs and watched the horizon until their eyes blurred and their children grew old without them. He could stretch his hand across the sea and make it flat as glass, calm enough to see the reflections of stars, calm enough to make you forget what lived beneath. Or he could flick his wrist and send waves the height of mountains crashing into cities that had forgotten to leave an offering. A single goat, a single libation of wine poured into the surf. That was all he asked, and they forgot often. They forgot always. There was a queen once, beautiful and proud, named Cassiopeia. She stood before her court and announced that her daughter Andromeda was more beautiful than the Nereids, the sea nymphs who danced in Poseidon's halls. She said this loudly. She said this in a city built on a cliff overlooking his water. Poseidon heard her from the bottom of the sea where he was feeding his horses. He said nothing. He simply rose from his hall, walked across the sea floor with his trident dragging behind him, and sent a monster after the girl Cetus, a creature so vast that its spine broke the surface in 3 different places at once. Andromeda escaped only by being chained to a rock as an offering, saved at the last moment by a hero. But the sea does not apologize. The sea does not take back its punishments. Cassiopeia sits in the stars now, chained to her own throne, upside down half the year as the constellations turn. There was a king named Minos who ruled the island of Crete. Minos prayed to Poseidon for a sign that he was the true king, not his brothers. Poseidon sent a snow-white bull rising from the foam, so beautiful that its horns shone like polished moonlight, so strong that the ground shook when it walked. He asked only one thing in return: sacrifice the bull to his glory, kill it, burn it, give it back to the sea that made it. But Minos looked at the animal and loved its beauty too much. He kept it. He sacrificed a lesser beast instead, an old bull with cracked horns and tired eyes. Poseidon waited. Poseidon always waits. And then he made Minos's wife, Pasiphae, fall in love with the white bull. From that impossible love came the Minotaur, half man, half bull, hidden in a labyrinth that the sea could not reach but had, in its way, built. Every year, Athens sent 14 children to be devoured. That was the price of one man's greed. Poseidon laughed once. Only once, but the stories remember it. It happened when Odysseus of Ithaca, the cleverest of men, mocked him after blinding his son Polyphemus, the Cyclops who had eaten 6 of Odysseus's crew. Poseidon could have killed the mortal then. He could have reached down and crushed the little ship between 2 fingers. Instead, he raised his trident, touched the horizon, and whispered a curse that would become an epic. May no one reach home but you, and may your homecoming be terrible. Odysseus wandered 10 years for that laugh. He watched his crew die one by one, eaten by giants, turned to pigs, struck by his own men's stupidity. When he finally reached Ithaca, he found his house overrun with suitors and had to kill them in their own blood. Poseidon watched from a wave and nodded. That was justice. Not mercy. Justice. And yet, sailors poured wine into the sea for him, dark red wine that bloomed like blood in the salt water. Fishermen carved small tridents into their oars, not out of love but out of recognition. Cities built fountains in his name, and horses, his greatest gift to humankind, were led to the water's edge to be blessed with salt and barley. He was not loved. He was not wanted at dinner parties, but he was acknowledged. That was enough for a god who knew that every shore was only a temporary victory for the land. The sea always takes back what it wants. It just takes its time. Poseidon grows old in the stories now, gray as storm clouds, his voice the sound of gravel grinding beneath deep water. No one builds new temples to him. No one carves his face into prows anymore. But on certain nights, when the wind turns sudden and the waves rise without warning, when the tide pulls out further than it should and stays there too long, you can still feel him down there, running his hand along the sea floor, turning shells over in his palm, deciding whether to let this ship pass, whether to let this fisherman live one more season, whether to remind the world just once more that the land is borrowed. The sea is never still. It does not forgive. It does not forget. It only waits, patient as pressure, heavy as depth, cold as the dark between stars. And every so often, without warning, it rises up and reminds you who holds the trident.